Maya stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying the reflection staring back at her. Her fingers grazed the faint lines of age that had begun to frame her face, evidence of the years spent nurturing a family, sacrificing her own dreams for the well-being of her husband, David, and their daughter Lila. At 42, she felt a pang of self-awareness. She had always prided herself on maintaining a calm exterior, the steady anchor in her family's life, yet inside, a storm had been brewing for months. Maya had everything she thought she wanted: a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, a caring husband, and a child she adored. But beneath it all, something had begun to feel off. She ran her fingers through her hair, its color now showing hints of gray at the temples. She wasn't young anymore, and yet, in the past few weeks, she felt an odd disconnect from her own reflection. Something had changed. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt as though the life she had built was quietly slipping through her fingers, unseen and unnoticed. A soft knock at the door snapped her from her thoughts. It was Lila. "Mama." Lila's voice was tentative, yet laced with concern. "You okay?" Maya turned to find her daughter standing in the doorway, her 15-year-old eyes wide with uncertainty. Lila had inherited her mother's long, dark hair and soft smile, but there was something in the girl's expression that didn't sit right with Maya. It wasn't the way Lila looked at her, no, it was the way she looked at David. Over the last few months, Maya had noticed the subtle shift. Lila, once a child who saw her father as her hero, had started to withdraw from him. She'd grown more distant, more independent. And Maya couldn't help but notice how Lila had begun to take on more of her own characteristics: her mannerisms, her soft voice, her deep brown eyes. It was the look in Lila's face, though, when she glanced at her father, that unsettled Maya the most. Lila's resemblance to her husband, David, had always been a comforting constant, until it wasn't. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Maya asked, masking the worry she felt beneath a smile. Lila hesitated. "I don't know. I was just thinking about how things have been lately," she muttered, looking away. "Have you and Dad been okay?" The question was innocent enough, but Maya felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Was Lila noticing something too? She had tried to ignore the mounting sense of discomfort that lingered between her and David, but the cracks in their relationship were beginning to show. The truth was, Maya and David hadn't been okay for quite a while. There were nights when David would return from work late, his silence more telling than any argument could be. There were mornings when Maya woke up and felt an inexplicable distance between them, like they were in the same room, but no longer in the same life. "Your father and we're fine," Maya replied, her voice a little too sharp. She smiled reassuringly at her daughter, though her own heart was pounding. "Don't worry about us. How are you?" Lila shrugged and walked into the room, sitting on the edge of the bed. She paused before speaking again, her eyes flicking toward the window. "I don't know, Mom," Lila said, her voice small. "It just feels weird sometimes. Like you and Dad, you guys are different." Maya froze. "What do you mean by that, honey?" "I don't know," Lila muttered, her face scrunching up. "It's like you guys are living in two different worlds, but you're still in the same house. I see how Dad looks at you, and it's like he's waiting for something. And I know you're both trying, but it's not the same." Maya's stomach clenched. There was an honesty in Lila's words that felt like a slap to the face. Maya had always been the one to keep the peace, to hold everything together. But now, for the first time, Lila was seeing the cracks in their marriage, the ones Maya had been desperately trying to ignore. "You're just growing up, sweetheart," Maya said quickly, trying to steer the conversation away from the uneasy truth. "Things change, but that doesn't mean they're bad." But Lila wasn't convinced. "It's more than that, Mom. I don't know what's going on, but I can feel it." She paused, as if gathering courage. "I don't look like Dad. And it feels like you're scared to talk about it." Maya's heart stopped. The words Lila had spoken were both innocent and piercing. Was she truly seeing what Maya had been trying to ignore all along? The physical differences between Lila and David had always been subtle. At first, they seemed like quirks of nature, small anomalies. But the more she noticed them, the more they felt like a question, one that no one had dared to ask. Maya's mind flashed back to the night she'd spent with another man before David, the one she had so carefully buried in her past. The one-night affair, which she had thought would remain hidden forever, had clearly left a mark that neither she nor David could ever erase. "Maya." Lila's voice snapped her back to the present. The young girl's eyes were searching her mother's face, looking for answers. "What's wrong, Mom?" Maya forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nothing, Lila. We're fine. You know that, right?" Lila nodded, but the worry in her gaze didn't fade. She stood up and left the room, leaving Maya standing there, her hands trembling. As Maya looked at herself in the mirror once again, the weight of the truth pressed down on her like a heavy stone. The question had been planted, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. Lila wasn't David's daughter. The truth was out there, hanging in the air like an unsaid word, and no matter how hard Maya tried, she couldn't escape it. But how could she tell David? And more importantly, how could she face the reality that everything she had built might come crashing down because of a mistake made in the past, a mistake that had never truly been forgotten, even if it had been buried? The truth was a silent, living thing in their home now. And Maya could feel it, inching closer with every passing day. As the days passed, Maya tried to bury the gnawing discomfort that had settled in her chest. But it wasn't easy. Lila's words still echoed in her mind, cutting through the quiet of the house. "It's not the same, Mom." How could it be? Everything in Maya's world had felt fragile, as though it could collapse at any moment. David seemed more distant, though he wasn't overtly cold. He had always been a man of few words, but recently, there was a certain heaviness in his silence that Maya couldn't shake off. She'd always been able to read him, his moods, his thoughts, but now she felt like a stranger in her own marriage. It was Saturday morning, the perfect time for family to reconnect over breakfast. David sat across from Maya at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee mug, his thoughts clearly far away. Maya, however, couldn't stop herself from glancing over at Lila, who was sitting at the counter, flipping through a magazine. Her eyes were a bit too focused on the pages, a little too distant for someone her age. Maya couldn't help herself. She had to ask. "David," she began, her voice carefully even, "do you think Lila looks different lately?" David looked up, surprised by the question. His brow furrowed, and he took a slow sip of coffee, as though weighing his answer. "Different how?" His voice was low, almost guarded. Maya felt a chill in the air. "I don't know. She's growing up of course, but I feel like she's not quite the same." David shrugged slightly, as though the question was too trivial to warrant any real thought. "She's a teenager, Maya. Of course, she's going to change. It's nothing to worry about." Maya's stomach twisted. That response, that lack of curiosity stung. She wanted to argue, to say more, but the words stuck in her throat. Maybe David didn't see what she saw. Or maybe he was choosing not to see. I feel like there's something we're missing," Maya whispered, almost to herself. David placed his mug down, his gaze softening. "Maya, you're overthinking it. I know things feel tense between us, but it's just growing pains. Lila's becoming her own person. It's part of life. We've been through much worse than this." The casual dismissal hurt more than Maya had expected. She wanted him to see it, to understand what was happening beneath the surface. But David, ever the optimist, refused to entertain the possibility that something was wrong. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he couldn't. That afternoon, after David had gone for his weekly run, Maya found herself alone with her thoughts, wandering through the house in a daze. The quiet felt oppressive, each room echoing the uncertainty that had come to define her life. Maya stood in the hallway for a long while, staring at the family photos hanging on the wall. Their wedding picture, a snapshot from years ago, seemed so distant now, so foreign. She remembered how David had looked at her then, so full of love, so proud. And yet now, there was a coldness between them, something neither of them spoke about but both could feel. Maya's eyes moved to a photo of Lila as a young girl, her small hand gripping David's, both of them smiling up at the camera. The image had once been a symbol of everything she held dear. But now, looking at it, Maya felt only a creeping sense of unease. Was this still their family? Was Lila truly their daughter? The thought seemed too unbearable to entertain. And yet, the more Maya tried to push it aside, the more insistent it became. Lila was growing up, yes, but there was more to it. Her features, the roundness of her face, the color of her eyes, the way she carried herself, it was as though she were becoming a stranger, not just to David, but to Maya herself. How had this happened? How had Maya allowed herself to ignore the subtle signs for so long? Maya had always been careful. She had told herself that her affair with Nathan, the man she had once loved passionately before David, had been a mistake, something she would bury and never speak of again. But Lila's appearance, her mannerisms, the unmistakable similarity to Nathan, it had begun to haunt Maya, a ghost of the past that wouldn't stay buried. That night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, Maya made up her mind. She would get the DNA test. It felt like a betrayal, both to David and to Lila, but Maya couldn't live with the nagging doubt anymore. She had to know the truth. No more pretending. No more denying the possibility that everything she had built was a lie. She stood in the bathroom, holding the small strand of Lila's hair in her hand, a wave of guilt crashing over her. How could she do this? How could she betray her family like this? But then she thought of the years of uncertainty, the nagging suspicion that had eaten away at her. She couldn't pretend anymore. For her own peace of mind, for David's, and for Lila's, the truth had to come out. The test would reveal what Maya had feared. It would tear their lives apart, but at least they would have answers. At least she would know once and for all if Lila was truly David's daughter, or if, all these years, she had been living a lie. The next few days passed in a blur, with Maya feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her every moment. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, couldn't focus on anything except the truth that loomed just beyond her reach. The hair sample she had taken from Lila was already on its way to the lab. There was no going back now. Maya had told herself it was just a formality, that she needed to know for peace of mind, that this doubt had been eating her up inside for too long. But as the days ticked by, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this decision would change everything, forever. It was late on a Wednesday evening when the phone call came. Maya had just finished tucking Lila into bed, and David was in the living room, flipping through a book. She'd avoided talking to him too much lately, but there was an unease between them, a rift that neither of them acknowledged. The phone rang, its tone piercing the silence of the house. "Hello?" Maya answered, her voice tight. "Maya Mitchell?" The voice on the other end was professional, but there was an edge to it. "This is Dr. Harris, from the testing center. I'm calling regarding the DNA test results you submitted." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The blood rushed to her head, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to slow down. "Yes," she managed to say, though her throat felt dry. "I regret to inform you that the results have come back. The sample from your daughter, Lila, does not match the biological father you've listed." Maya's world tilted. She gripped the phone tighter, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid so. The results show a different genetic match. The biological father is not the man you've indicated on the form." The words hung in the air, too heavy to process. Maya's hands trembled as she tried to steady herself. Her vision blurred. Her daughter was not David's. The truth, the cold, hard truth, had just been confirmed. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice distant, and then she hung up. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, the phone dangling from her hand. The house felt suffocating. Her breathing was shallow, and her mind raced. There was no mistaking it now. Lila wasn't David's. The man she had loved before David, the man she had once thought she would marry, the man she had shared a moment of weakness with, was Lila's father. Nathan. Maya's thoughts turned to the past, the night she and Nathan had shared, the passion they had felt for one another before life had torn them apart. That one night, that single ill-fated mistake, had led to this moment. And now, 15 years later, she was holding on to a truth that could destroy everything she had built with David. Maya thought of David. What would she tell him? How could she tell him that the child he had raised as his own for the last 15 years was not his? How could she explain the betrayal, the secrecy, the shame that had followed her all these years? She felt sick to her stomach. The weight of the truth felt unbearable, as though she were carrying a burden that would crush her. And yet, no matter how much she wished she could go back in time and undo it all, she knew there was no escaping this. She needed to face David. She needed to tell him the truth. But how? Where could she even begin? David came into the hallway, his footsteps echoing through the quiet house. He looked at Maya, his eyes full of concern, as he noticed the stricken expression on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low. "Maya, what happened?" Maya swallowed hard, the words thick in her throat. She didn't know how to say it, how to explain the unexplainable. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. It felt like the entire world had stopped moving. I need to tell you something, Maya said finally, her voice shaky. David's gaze softened as he stepped closer to her. What is it, Maya? Maya stared at him, feeling the weight of every moment they had shared, every smile, every laugh, every tear, all of it rushing to the surface. But this was different. This was a truth that could shatter everything. David reached out to her, touching her arm gently. Maya, talk to me. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Her chest tightened as she looked up at him, his concern written across his face. She had always been able to rely on him, always believed in the strength of their marriage. But now she had to tell him, she had to admit the truth that would change everything. David, she breathed in, her voice barely audible. Lila isn't your daughter. David froze. His hand fell away from her arm, and his expression turned to one of confusion, then disbelief. What? He whispered, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. She's not your biological daughter, Maya repeated, her voice cracking under the weight of the words. David, she's Nathan's. The words hung in the air like an executioner's sentence, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. David's face went pale, his lips trembling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only the devastating truth between them. David took a step back, as though the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. No, that's not possible. Maya, his voice was shaking, and Maya could see the confusion, the hurt, the betrayal in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know how, Maya whispered, tears starting to well up in her eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, David. I thought I could bury it, but now, it's come out. I'm so sorry. David's gaze grew hard, his face a mask of pain. You've been lying to me, for 15 years. I know, and I'm so sorry. But I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen. Maya's voice broke as she reached out to him. Please, David, you have to understand. I love you. I always have. David backed away from her, his eyes filled with disbelief. How could you keep something like this from me? How could you raise her as my daughter and never tell me the truth? I didn't know what else to do, Maya cried. I thought we could be a family, even if I was living a lie. David turned away, his body rigid with anger. I can't do this, Maya. I need time.